On this episode of That Was a Show, I was looking for reviews of The Charmings to no avail, and I did come across a review for a show called Hi Honey, I'm Home. It stated that that show was of a similar premise, but not as well executed as The Charmings, which all of us found
is
wild and baffling. This show, Hi Honey, I'm Home, actually sounds quite clever, and we were enticed to investigate.
Hearing it described, I was so excited to watch it, because what a great concept.
I have to say, and I think we're all on the same page here, I was very pleasantly surprised. We truly liked this show.
I loved it.
I loved it too.
It was great.
I loved it. I wish there were more episodes. Cold open. We grew up during peak sitcom. Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince. But those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
and Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Hi Honey, I'm Home ran from July 19th, 1991 to July 12, 1992. It was part of ABC's Friday night TGIF lineup, and the same episode would re-air Sunday night on Nickelodeon during a slot they called Nick at Night. We open in present day, a 90s family living in New Jersey. Elaine Duff is the single mother of two sons, an older teenager, Mike, and a younger adolescent, Sydney, who goes by the nickname Skunk. Unlike typical 90s sitcoms, where in the single-parent scenario, the other parent passed away, or it's vague and never explained, Elaine makes it very clear that her ex-husband left her for another woman after she put him through college. He's apparently an asshole and isn't missed. Mike is obsessed with a classic 50s sitcom called Hi Honey, I'm Home, about what is positioned as a prototypical idyllic 1950s family. Reruns of the show are pulled off the air to make way for, get this, perfect for us, Joni Loves Chachi, and Mike is very disappointed. Meanwhile, new neighbors have moved in next door and Elaine wants to meet them. Elaine is hoping they will sign her petition in support of a woman's right to choose. And in terms of comparisons between the 50s and the 90s, we are off to the races. Mike has a suspicion that he recognizes this mysterious family, and this is confirmed soon after when he accidentally spots them transition from color to black and white. In fact, they are the family from Hi Honey, I'm Home, and they've been placed there as part of the sitcom relocation program, an equivalent to the witness protection program for sitcom families to hide out in secret when their shows are off the air. They use an old remote control called a turnerizer to make themselves appear to be in color to fit in.
I love that.
Yeah.
They are the Nielsen family, a great reference to how TV ratings used to be measured, and they are comprised of archetypal 50s sitcom housewife, Honey Nielsen, naive and constantly baffled husband Lloyd, their teenage daughter Babs, and adolescent son Chucky. The Nielsens are of course very old-fashioned in their attitudes. Honey has been very sheltered, and as she becomes friends with her new 90s neighbor Elaine, she starts to come out of her shell. So, Mike needs to keep their true origin a secret to protect them. Elaine needs to contend with Lloyd's backward attitudes in order to maintain a friendship with Honey, and the Nielsens are learning to embrace their new surroundings, a world that is starkly different from the saccharine comfort of the television show where they used to live.
So that was a very long explanation.
That was a long walk to get to what would happen if a 90s sitcom family lived next to a 50s sitcom family.
I did admittedly go down a bit of a rabbit hole in planning out this description.
You really erranded it there.
I did.
Everyone out there that thinks that we're just a bunch of trolls that trash these old shows.
They will now be proven otherwise.
Because we truly liked this show.
I loved it.
I loved it too.
It was
Yeah.
great.
I loved it. I wish there were more episodes.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, 13 episodes were made. It was pulled off the air from ABC after 6 had aired, and the balance of the episodes continued to play on Nick at Night. I'm also going to say we also need a disambiguation here. I am not making this up. This is an actual disclaimer on Wikipedia when you look up this show, as many of you listening might choose to do. This show is not to be confused with Heil, Honey, I'm Home, which again, I'm not making this up, is a British sitcom that lasted on the air for one episode about Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun living next door to a Jewish couple in a style that spoofs mid-20th century American sitcoms. It is widely regarded as the worst sitcom ever made, and it goes without saying, is in extremely poor taste. I don't know what the scenario was where someone decided to greenlight it, but then immediately after it aired was like, oh, what have we done?
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. So
moving on to the show that we are talking about.
So the show we are talking about, Hi, Honey, I'm Home, as Brynn was saying, I was going to mention this at the end, but I think it is actually worth pointing out now. Like, we're 12 episodes into our podcast. We've always been hoping to find something that we genuinely like. And in the cold open of the show, I talk about this podcast being about the rough. But by the rough, we also mean the challenges of an industry that didn't always let the best ideas prevail. We've always been hoping to find our proverbial freaks and geeks, if you will, like a show that did not last very long. But as soon as we watch it, we think, well, this clearly deserved to last a lot longer. What happened? And I'm happy to report we've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we weren't that hard on Aftermash, and I feel like I liked something, but I can't remember what it was.
There was a lot of redeeming things of Golden Palace.
I kind of like. Yeah, Golden Palace is fun. I kind of like muddling through.
Yeah,
but yeah, this is you know, this is an unqualified like for me. Like
for sure.
It's got issues
for sure.
It's got problems, but what show doesn't? I got nothing but love and respect for the people that make these shows.
Yeah.
Everybody's out there trying, man. And I respect that.
Yeah.
Taking a big swing anytime someone tries to make a show and does something creative like this. And it's a lot of work, and credit where credit's due. And usually we do tend to point out the aspects of shows that we genuinely did like. But this is the first time when totally organically we happened upon a show that all three of us genuinely liked. If you shot this show in HD and released it this year on Netflix, people would go nuts for it. This was ahead of its time.
I don't know if they would. I think that it's always going to face the same problems that it faced in 1991.
I think the challenge is that now in 2020, we're so far away from the 50s.
Yeah.
We're way too far away from the 50s. Like, we're probably the youngest people that would sort of get that whole shtick that was happening.
The 50s specifically, but I think it was, I can't remember which of you proposed this concept, but if someone made a show...
I was on this pretty hard last time. I was spinning off pretty hard.
I think you said, what if someone made a show in 2020 that followed this same premise, but where the displaced family was from the 80s or 90s?
Yeah, that could work.
I want to do this exact show, but it's set on a cul-de-sac or a court or a little circle or crescent. And it's got 4 families on it. And it's got a modern day family, and it's got a 90s family, an 80s family, and then a 50s family. And I think you could make just as many points about modern society with all that as you do here.
I think one of the things that this show does well is it takes its ideas to the end of the line. So it doesn't half-ass any of the commentary when it brings up a particular perspective. It really drills down to it as far as it can. And so even just the parody of a 50s sitcom, the Hi, Honey, I'm Home show within a show, like that whole little bit of like, oh, the boss is coming over. And then the boss is like, hey, it might be finally time to talk about that big promotion. Like, they really take these deliveries to the point where it's almost like the tone of sketch comedy, where it's that little bit more over the top than you would be expecting, but packaged into the recurring characters and situations of a sitcom.
And every episode either starts or ends, or both sometimes, with a little bit from Hi Honey, I'm Home. Like the actual sitcom that has nothing to do with the sitcom that we're watching today called Hi Honey, I'm Home. The 50s sitcom Hi Honey, I'm Home that they're, they have little scenes from it. And I sometimes worry if people watching that were like, well, this isn't very funny. And you're like, no, it's not. That's the joke. It's a 50s sitcom. Yeah. Like those little bits where they show parts of the sitcom aren't supposed to be funny. They're supposed to be a bit from a 50s sitcom where,
they're supposed to be stale and dated. That's the point. Yeah.
I mean, and Barry, you said that they have nothing to do with the sitcom. I
don't know.
But
that's stupid.
But they do, though.
Yeah, it's silly that I said that. I don't know why I was saying that.
It sets up a theme. It shows it in that context of the 50s, how it would play out. And then it shows the quote unquote IRL situation and how it plays out in the 90s and how the 90s characters interact with that and like impact that weird like 50s scenario. So I don't know.
You're right. You're right. That always sets up the themes of the episode beautifully. Actually,
it's just I don't know. Smart. It's just really well done.
Yeah,
it's just really well written, really well thought out, and it's meta in all the good ways. It's
extremely meta.
In the 50s, the sitcom family, the Nielsen's, they never break with their delivery, even when there's moments of Honey's little evolution. Like basically what is happening is Honey is gradually becoming woke,
Yeah, she is. She's learning about feminism and she's learning about
she's developing agency.
World issues.
She's developing agency and she's also starting to care about social issues that because of the influence of Elaine and being in a modern day world, she's getting her eyes open to a lot of different things, but she still delivers everything and she still interacts with everything in that very 50s tone. Yep. And when Lloyd and Honey are talking about these issues and Lloyd is starting to get perturbed with Honey's new awakening, they still deliver that dialogue in the very 50s format, in the very kind of over-the-top, silly, kitschy way that they do, which I think is really great because it's just a fun way of taking, like, they don't break from that.
That's absolutely true. And even like in the dialogue, they take lines of dialogue that are very strong commentary and they consistently package it in that perfect delivery. And it's also it's perfect delivery from a vocal delivery perspective, but also from a physicality perspective. The characters are especially
physical.
Especially Honey, but also Lloyd. I mean,
Babs too.
Yeah.
The whole 50s family is so pitch perfect in, the presence of the live studio audience.
Yeah.
One thing, this may seem like a small detail, but to me, I thought it was extremely effective. So this was filmed before a live studio audience in a genuine fashion, not canned laugh track. And there's an audio sound design detail that I very quickly noticed about the show that they consistently do. You can hear the ambience of the studio and of the live studio audience with a lot of presence. There's a lot of reverb to the stage in a way that has nothing to do with the way shows were made in 1991. This was not the norm for sitcoms at the time. In fact, the sound design of this show sounds like either a 50s sitcom or something that we might recognize more from like Saturday Night Live or some other live show.
There's some coughs in there.
Yes. The presence of the audience is constant and it sounds very live. And the characters often square themselves up to the audience a beat before delivering a line in a way that is extremely live. And they're very consistent with this. And it really kind of lends to this idea that this is a presentation about 50s versus 90s sitcoms. Like that this is this heightened level of satire or commentary. It works so well.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think just to kind of piggyback a bit on what Brynn was saying, the reason the show works so well is Honey. Honey is
She's
everything about this show.
phenomenal.
Charlotte Booker. She's incredible in this role. It's, and it's not like the joke of her being a sitcom character, like, and all that. It's lots of fun. She's a great character in her own rights. Like, she would work as a sitcom character in a sitcom not parodying sitcoms. Like, she would be so much fun in a 50s show. And like, her character evolves episode by episode in a way that is not seen very often in sitcoms. And like, it was such a weird like treat where I was watching multiple episodes in a row where I'm like, oh wow, she's learned this from the last time she did this. And like, it was, like she has an arc.
Yeah. She's learning things, but she's also not.
She's not parroting. She's learning.
Yeah. We're watching her learn. But she's still true to herself and her personality. She's still her bubbly self, and she's still her, I don't know what other way to put it, but she's still her adorable self.
Yeah.
You're seeing her awaken and learn, but there's no weird pretense of, okay, because she's learning, she's now going to become more... I don't know. What's
more 90s?
Yeah,
like the joke in any other show would generally have her being more 90s all the time.
That's exactly right.
She's becoming woke in her way of thinking, but she's not joining the 90s. Like she's not like talking about jazzercise or like
she's evolving within her context. And this is a testament to the caliber of acting that's happening there, which is that she is consistently staying within the apparatus of this displaced 50s person. But we're seeing her evolve and learn as a person from that world. Yeah. Which is very impressive.
Yeah. If I had watched more of this, I would love to see what happened with the kids. Like it seems that there are glimpses that Chucky's having a bit of a tough time. Like Chucky is their young son.
They're precocious, like little their little
Scout.
beaver.
He's not just a Boy Scout or a sailor or a scientist. Just so everyone knows, every time this kid comes on screen, he's in some ridiculous new outfit. So it's like he's either a cosplayer or he's like a future member of the Village People or something. But he's like this like different like weird art.
And it's never commented on.
Oh,
no, it's never
because
commented
the way
on.
they do it, it's clear that he's being sent out on stage by writers or producers behind the scene that are like, for today's episode, you're going to be in this outfit.
Yeah,
it's clearly not his agency. Yeah, it's just, this is the wardrobe he was given.
Here's the sitcom kid who's a gimmick, right? He's like kind of like the beaver. But you see, there's a scene where he's sitting there and he's having this like existential moment where he's saying, it's like I'm invisible or something. And then Mike like ignores him and like blows him off. And so I just wonder where they were going to take Chucky, because I found him to be like, he was like a one-note character, but then maybe in the same way that Honey evolves, maybe he evolves as well.
Yeah, and the teenage daughter, like Babs, has these moments where you see she's starting to be aware of modern culture and how things are perceived and whatnot, but she still maintains her 50s, like, her 50s good girl persona. And it would have been really interesting to see that break and evolve over the course of the show too, but we don't really get a lot of it.
Can we talk about just like, I've always been a huge fan of Julie Benz, but she was so phenomenal. Like she was just so good. She just captured that like kind of cartoony Disney princess vibe so perfectly. And this is the thing that I see a lot when I watch something where it's an actor in their early 20s or their late teens. They have a hard time separating from modern day cool young person persona. Yeah. And she just effortlessly falls into this bubbly, adorable, like 50s.
Yeah. Oh, no, she nails every element of it.
Yeah.
And while we get to see Honey start to evolve very rapidly, and it's such an engrossing character, I do think maybe, if the show had a little bit more runway, we might get a chance to see similar things happen with the other 50s characters. And also, going outside of the 50s family, the skunk character also to me
Skunk's
felt
great.
Oh, he's great, but he's great as a concept. I felt he was also maybe like not quite as three-dimensional as the other characters. Like
he is a sitcom character.
We have to say also, for anyone listening, we binged on every single episode of this that we could find. And we managed to get up to episode 6. So yeah, it just would have been so interesting to see where they took this. And I've read that season 2 was actually better than season 1, but we weren't able to find any of those episodes.
I just saw an image from another episode in season 2. It was like, I think it's the premiere of season 2, and like the synopsis was the Nielsen's learn about sex, and the screen cap was Julie Benz and Skunk is showing her like a big like roll of condoms, and I was just like, oh my god, why can't I see that episode? That's amazing.
I did read about that because it's the whole thing.
They're promoting safe sex, so that's good.
But they're so consistent in not breaking with the apparatus of the 50s characters that they don't know anything that wasn't in the scripts for their show Hi Honey I'm Home. So not only are they from the 50s and whatever difference that makes from the 90s,
but they're from the idyllic 50s.
But they're from an idyllic fake TV world 50s where they only know what the producers of their show let them know.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And I think the thing that Skunk, I think, is trying to bring across is that they could have easily made the 90s family to be a realistic family, but they too are a 90s sitcom family.
Yes.
And the writers are so aware that they are sitcom characters as well.
Yeah.
That I found that really, it was a great touch, because I remember the first episode, I was having a hard time getting into the rhythm of it. And then I was just like, right, Mike is not supposed to be a real person. He's also a sitcom character.
Yeah. He's also,
I think they're even, like, it could, to the point where I would wonder if the show went on long enough, if they discover that they're also a sitcom family.
Oh man, how good would that be?
Oh, that would be such a good twist.
Yeah.
That they are a show within a show or something like that, and the universe expands.
Oh man, that would be so next
because
level.
The three,
I don't know if they had that plan, but you know,
like a Truman Show sort of scenario.
Yeah.
And so elephant in the room here. I mean, usually we get into, hey, what's a version of this show that works? Obviously, this one works. But there's a big elephant in the room is, obviously the version of this show that works is Pleasantville.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. This is like an obvious thing that it was like, okay, like, I'm going to say I actually like this better than Pleasantville.
So do I. I like this better than Pleasantville.
I happen to love Pleasantville. It's like, it's an amazing movie. I think it is not spoken of enough. Pleasantville, I love Pleasantville so much.
I don't know. There's things about Pleasantville that I'm not that into. And I think it's too dramatic. Like, it's too...
Sure. But that's the movie it is. It's an existential movie, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Pleasantville misses the mark where this doesn't, in that I think the best way to do this idea has to be on a sitcom. Like, instead of a 2-hour movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's gotta be, this is where you do this idea.
Because this is where you can see characters evolve over a longer period of time.
Pleasantville is the Technicolor elephant in the room.
Yeah, there's things that seem blatantly ripped off of Hi Honey I'm Home if this person, like, what I'm curious about is when the screenwriter of Pleasantville wrote Pleasantville, like, what came first? Because there's too many close parallels.
I mean, Pleasantville's a full 8 years later, so...
Yeah.
It feels like this did it first.
Well, because, like, Mike in Hi Honey I'm Home is, like, basically the same character as Tobey Maguire.
He absolutely is.
Both characters, they're using this old sitcom as a way to soothe their anxieties about modern life.
Right.
They're getting comfort out of this show. and irrationally want to escape into it.
Remind me what triggered the escapism in Pleasantville?
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire being similar to Mike.
It's the same thing. He's obsessed with this old sitcom.
Okay, and so what is it in his life that might be driving that obsession?
It's the same reasons as Mike. Like, he feels like alienated, like he doesn't have a lot of friends. Like, he'd rather watch this old sitcom than go out and do something. And they make that same comment
That's so
in Hi, Honey,
interesting.
I'm Home.
Mike is in this situation where the father is gone, and it seems like maybe he's craving this sort of idyllic family that's presented in the 50s sitcom.
I mean, it's not even just his father being gone. It's the fact is his mother isn't what he views as what a typical mother should be. His brother, his relationship with his brother is not, you know. And I think episode 6 has a great scene where like he kind of tells that to Honey, and Honey is just like, "Well, what are you talking about? Your mom's like amazing."
I love that scene.
I love that scene.
Your mom, your mom works all day and she takes care of you, and then she has time to like
try to save the world at night.
Yeah, she puts her soul into saving the world at night, and I was just like, what a great scene.
It was a powerful scene.
It was.
Coming from Honey, too, to be the one to try to burst the bubble that he has of, like, because obviously he grew up, like, watching this show and thinking that that's what's normal or that that's what's ideal, and that it's Honey to be the one to be like, no, your mother's great.
We don't get a lot of Mike's life.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where this differs from Pleasantville quite a bit.
Yeah.
In no way is Mike the main character of this show.
No.
In the pilot, he is who we view the show through. But once that's over with, Mike is very much a side character. And the main character of the show is 100% Honey. Whereas in Pleasantville, it's about him learning things and all that. Whereas this show is more about Honey becoming a person.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
Yeah.
And there's another big difference in that Tobey Maguire's character and Reese Witherspoon's character in Pleasantville become a literal part. Like, they become those sitcom teenagers.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, obviously in this show, that doesn't happen. Because that is a weird thing for a 90s boy to be obsessed with. Is like this weird hokey 50s sitcom. Like, that is a really odd thing to be a fanboy of.
It is, until this very show reminded me how big Nick at Night was. We didn't get it in Canada, but Nick at Night was huge.
I guess so, yeah.
And Nick at Night was just this. It was basically bringing 50s sitcoms, and like, look at all the commercials for Nick at Night during this. All they were doing was selling 50s nostalgia to modern day audiences, to the point where like you would have thought those commercials were specifically tailor-made to this show, but they weren't. That was just Nick at Night.
Yeah.
So I think it was very common for outside boys to do that kind of thing in the early 90s more than the late 90s.
But what are like the weird implications of that? Like, a kind of awkward antisocial boy looking backward in time, and like
Mike makes me uncomfortable. Like, his character.
Well, through today's lens, I think we all know what the implications of that are.
Yeah,
and they're
like
not
he
great.
might be wearing a MAGA hat. Like,
there's no might about it.
Mike makes me like uncomfortable, both in his pursuit of Babs, but also in his relationship with Honey, where I'm like, man, you are really inserting yourself into this family.
Yeah. He wants to insert himself in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Like,
but I think
who does he want to sleep with? Does he want to?
I can't tell. I can't tell, because part of me
is it
is
Babs
like,
or Honey?
Well, like, I was just like, man, I kind of wanted them to go there. Like, I was like, man, wouldn't it be great if like
it's a more innocent show than that.
But maybe eventually they do go there.
Maybe
we don't
do.
know what would have happened.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that it begins with the idea that he developed these crushes back when they were just characters on his TV set. And now that he's encountering them in real life, he can't help himself but extend those crushes to these people standing in front of him. But like, how far does this go? And how does that evolve? Like, we don't really know.
Yeah.
But here's another question about Mike. I'm wondering, and the fact that when he walks into their home and what he discovers transports him back to the 50s, there's a bit of Marty McFly in him. Am I crazy, or is there a bit of Marty McFly in him?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Marty is so much cooler than this
obviously, but
I mean, well, he doesn't have Marty McFly hair. He has full on mullet hair.
He has a mullet. He has a definite.
Do you think
Is that possible?
Yeah, maybe a little.
No, I got Marty vibes from him.
Sure.
It's impossible not to, I guess, when you're thrown. I mean, and there you go. There's your idea. You know, your original idea there just kind of stems from Back to the Future period, right? Like, taking an 80s kid and throwing him into the 50s.
Like, what was it about specifically teenage boys that made them nostalgic for that time? Is it because they were like confused about the way the world was changing and felt like that they would be like left behind somehow?
This is a common American ideal.
Yeah, like young white teenage boys.
I don't know if it's necessarily white teenage boys so much as it is white men writing about white teenage boys.
Yeah, I guess so.
But also, is this a situation of the tail wagging the dog? Is there a part of this where, I don't know, a media and industry decides to build up a whole thing of 50s nostalgia and put that in front of people? Because there's something kitschy about it. Back to the Future does a great job of showing off things like the origins of rock and roll and interesting hair and fashion. And is there an element where they kind of sugarcoat what that era was actually like with some of those superficial details and present that to people enough times that people start to find it appealing because it's just been put in front of them?
Always.
Yeah. But they're making really progressive commentary at the same time.
This show is other writers commenting on how much 50s nostalgia was a thing.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good analysis. That answers my question a little bit.
Yeah. Mad Men visually looks like, wow, how lovely everything was, but then it's so dark and seedy. It's dark, right? Yeah.
This is something we've explored in some past episodes. This first came up in Aliens in the Family, trying to figure out what the intention was of the creators of the show. And we would see either a satirical element to a show, a particular line, and think, is that intentional commentary? Are they commenting on this or are they supporting this? What is their perspective? And a lot of the shows that we deemed to have failed, it was often in part because we couldn't really figure out what they were actually trying to say or do. And this show, delightfully, I think it's very clear that this is intentionally strong satire, intentionally commentary on not just 1950s, but also a lot of these comparisons between 50s and 90s also serve up opportunities for the characters to talk about things that were still very relevant issues to comment on in the early 90s and still relevant today.
Yeah, for sure.
This might just be me completely armchair, like diagnosing this. It very rightfully looks back at what we idealized in the 50s and is just like, you know, look how shitty things actually were. Look how backwards these attitudes are, but also saying, look how far we haven't come.
Yeah.
I made this remark while we were watching the episode where, like, some of Lloyd, the father's sexist jokes, dress him up differently and they would still be in a sitcom today.
Oh, totally. Yeah, those same jokes would be on, like, The Big Bang Theory when it was on, or...
These are all Kevin Can Wait jokes.
Exactly. Kevin Can Wait. Anything where there's the lovable dopey husband and hot shrill wife.
The 50s apparatus that happens in the show is such a clearly laid out aspect of it. But even within Elaine's household and even in the 90s world, with the homeless person who comes by and her reactions to that, with the fear of crime, this constant undertone that keeps coming up of a fear of crime in the late 80s, early 90s, as if the streets are just this terrifying hellscape and all of the locks on her doors. And it really comes out a little bit as well that there's some commentary on, I think, that portrayal of America as well that became super pervasive.
Full of crime, and we should always be...
We should all live in fear. And there's during one of the commercial breaks when we watched this, it is pertinent to note there was an actual like war on drugs ad featuring President H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And during the episode, there is a great little comment on Bush and Bush's America.
And we're talking H.W.
H.W. Bush, 1991. And there's this whole tough on crime conservatism that's going on coming out of that era. And the show makes a comment on it in dialogue where they allude to the 50s sitcom dad who's currently in the White House. And so they really connect the dots on that pretty explicitly. And the reactions to the things that are happening in the 90s, I think it's also making it clear that they are commenting on present day as well.
Do you think...
Of course they are.
Yeah. Do you think the ridiculous hair and costume choices for the boys was a parody of 90s?
Yes.
Yeah.
At least Skunk. Well, you know what? I don't know anymore because the 90s really were that ridiculous. We were all there. Things were weird. I don't know.
Yeah, both boys had really horrible haircuts.
Yeah.
The first time Skunk is on camera, I'm surprised his shirt didn't like mess with the camera lighting this like black shirt with like every single shade of neon possible.
Skunk's just Bart Simpson, man.
Yeah, I guess
He's just a live action version of Bart Simpson.
So they position Elaine as this passionate social activist. She cares a lot about these causes. She's a strong feminist. And I worried that the show was going to set her up to just attack her on those points the way that the show Whoops that we talked about ages ago.
Oh, like, yeah.
Like they're setting her up as this explicit feminist so that they can dunk on her. But they
never are.
They never are.
They are on her side.
That's what I was getting at when I was saying that we can see the perspective of the creators of the show.
Yeah.
They are on her side.
Yeah.
This show is explicitly making feminist points that are relevant to not only a throwback commentary to how things were in the 50s, but also relevant points to the 90s and sadly relevant points to 2020.
Yeah.
Yep. As much as this show is kind of thumbing its nose at 50s ideals and seeing all these things like, look at blah, 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 blah. I think an interesting thing it also does is show in Honey herself that it's not all bad. Honey is a very loving character and she's a very optimistic character. And I think the fact that she doesn't lose these things as she's becoming acclimatized to the 90s is on purpose. I think that the fact that Honey remains this wonderful character that the other characters sort of learn from as well.
Right.
Like the fact that Mike looks up to her as a mother figure, hopefully a mother figure. And the fact that Elaine befriends her. And that was my favorite thing about the show. One of my favorite things about the show is when the show, you realize, it's going to the friendship between the two women is going to be a big part of the show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of hurt me in the scene where when they're kind of bickering.
Yeah, where they fight. Yeah, it's sad.
It hurt me that Elaine calls Honey a bimbo.
Yeah.
I was like, I felt that. And then Honey defends herself. It's just very interesting because, I don't know, I think Elaine realizes that eventually and they kind of, despite their differences, they are able to forge this friendship, which I think is like an important feminist message that women need to women who are different from each other need to see past these superficialities and find that common ground and learn from each other.
Yeah, Elaine needs to learn that Honey's operating with the tools she's given.
Yeah.
And there's so much potential for growth. And it's true that like Honey exudes a certain optimism and a certain nurturance that Elaine doesn't perhaps initially have because she also, as a 1991 sitcom cliche character, exudes a lot of the pessimism and cynicism of her era. And so from a perspective of learning about whether it's like feminism or politics or a lot of the social satire that happens in this show, we're clearly seeing a concept of the 50s being, let's say, backwards or anachronistic compared to the 90s, which in turn is still not a fully moral world, but something that's also evolving. But from a character perspective, them as individual people, they both have something of value and room for interesting emotional growth in their friendship.
I think you would have seen a lot more episodes where Elaine started to pick up things from Honey as well, because in episode 6 there is sort of that where it was the one of 4. It was the one with Jim Neighbors, but like where Elaine realizes she can be a little aggressive and she's not as supportive to her son as maybe he might need at this moment, right? And like these are things that like she can kind of start to pick up from Honey a little. Like she's learning how to be a better mother, even though like Elaine's this wonderful, she has all these wonderful qualities, and like she's a tough woman. And that, of course, her kids suffer a little sometimes because she's not always there for them because she has so much going on in her life. But you see that in the way Skunk's a cartoon character, but Mike, you see Mike is definitely. It's interesting that we talked about Mike, his father being gone. Mike in no way tries to bond with Lloyd, but he does try to bond with Honey in that, like, some of the loving mannerisms from a mother are things that he's kind of missing.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because Lloyd is, of course, not much of a parent. Because I think the way the show is going with Lloyd is Lloyd doesn't soften. Not really.
No.
He's
sweet. If anything,
at
he just
times. Yeah. And I think it would be a different show to have Lloyd learn too.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if, like, going forward, like, I would love to have seen them split up.
Yeah.
Ooh,
right?
Right? That's interesting.
But the thing with Lloyd is he does learn things from the 90s, but he picks up the toxic things.
Yeah, he does.
You know what I mean?
He does.
Like
he becomes a gun nut, like crazy.
Instant massive raging gun nut with an Uzi.
Yeah. And he's immediately like, this world is full of crime and we need to, he's suspicious of everybody. So he picks up all the toxic parts of.
He's a magnet for the worst of this world.
So it's very interesting. That whole subplot about gun control as well.
Yeah.
Like you said, he gets armed and he has an Uzi and it's meant to be cartoony, but then it gets serious because they foreshadow the whole, accidental shootings happen. And then they have an accidental shooting in their home with the dog. And then they make a joke of it. They're like, well, at least the dog caught it in his teeth or whatever.
Thank God for that. I was mad.
I was really upset. Like,
I was like, don't you dare shoot a dog on a sitcom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my favorite moment of dialogue that I wrote down, Honey and Lloyd are in their single beds in their bedroom with the two separate single beds.
Yeah.
And she has just come home from being part of a protest for equal pay for women with Elaine. And Lloyd is confronting her on that. And he says, I hate it when you have ideas in your head. I liked the old days back in Springfield when you were my little honey and you cooked and cleaned. And she's clearly frowning and has this pained expression. And like, it's not funny to her. And she says, I still do that. And he says, but now you think too. I hate that. And this is a perfect example of this show taking this interaction to its maximum. Like, it's really presenting him as this completely anachronistic figure who is not really open to growth. That was in episode 3. And so we're only 3 episodes in. And Honey is already starting to seriously question the attitudes of her sitcom husband. And he has not moved an inch.
Yeah.
I wonder, and this could have just been me reading too much into it, but like that line too, where she's like, well, I still do those things. That right there, it just kind of reminds me of this not weird because it's just fucking terrible, this double standard we hold for parents. And you would still see this on a sitcom today where it's like, it's great that Honey's out there like learning and trying to save the world and stuff, but just like Elaine, like she's still expected to cook and clean around the house. And like it felt like such a biting comment on like just even modern gender relationships, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
especially more in the 90s than say now.
Yeah.
But like in the early 90s, that was still very much expected,
Yeah, no, but it's interesting because to me it's saying a little more. It's saying like, no, I'm still me. Like, I'm still myself.
Yeah.
I just also have this extra thing now. I'm also evolving, kind of.
Yeah.
I'm still me, because this is the point I was trying to make before, is like, she's still very much her. She still likes what she likes. She still is like going to always wear curlers in her sleep and like wear pearls every day. And like, she's still her, but she also has this extra layer to her now. And that applies to anyone at any time. We can all evolve, and the people that are in our lives have to meet us where we're at, like they have to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And Lloyd, in that moment, you can see that he's so out of his element. There's no way for us to know exactly what the goal was, but the way it comes across is that he's not even capable of understanding what's happening. Like
it's so beyond his scope of understanding.
Beyond for him.
Yeah, he's so set in his ways. I think that all of that, his character in general, like his inability to change, I think it is such a wonderful comment on like the thinking of a typical sexist man. And I think they do that very much on purpose, that he can't learn, because I think in a lot of these cases, these men don't learn. I think the way they were writing it is that they were not going to be applying the same growth to Lloyd. And I don't think that's to the show's detriment. I think that losing Lloyd as this figure would be a problem. I think that you're having a character like Lloyd on the show in the mindset they have him in is a wonderful way to talk about a million different things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to the reason we haven't seen him get any form of awakening throughout what we watched is because of that. Like you lose a lot of the show, right?
Yeah.
And if this show only ever had Honey and Elaine grow as characters and everyone else remained as two-dimensional thematic archetypes, that would have worked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would have still been okay with it.
One of the things this show does that we started to talk about a bit is that every episode features cameos from actual old classic sitcoms. And I, of course, worried at the beginning that would become cheesy, or I wasn't sure how they were going to apply that. But amazingly, again, like I think
it always works.
It works.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And it works.
And it never distracts
either.
either.
It doesn't feel tacked on in an artificial way. It feels organic to the plot. It's this constant motif that seems to be both an actual nod to viewers who are fans of those classic sitcoms, who get to enjoy seeing these classic characters, but at the same time never breaks the satire that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah. It never breaks the flow of the episode either. And then most of the time they all show up at the very end, and then there's maybe like 30 seconds.
In and out. It's not like a extended thing. Like
they're not relying on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when Alice shows up, Ann B. Davis who plays Alice on the Brady Bunch, she pops in and does like a quick little, in and out thing, and it's very believable. It's like very
these are all
fun.
icing on the cake sort of moments where they appear.
Yeah. Or like Jim Neighbors as Gomer Pyle. And
yeah.
And that dance number, that was great.
Yeah. But I liked how they brought Gomer Pyle in as a way to like cheer up as a birthday surprise for Mike.
Yeah, that was sweet.
Yeah.
It was really sweet.
And it's like another weird commentary on like, what? Who is Mike really? Like, why is this what he's fanboying out over?
I know.
Yeah. Like every time he asks out Babs and she's like, I can't go out with you because you're not popular enough. And I'm like, and like 20 other reasons.
Yeah. Like he's constantly asking her out to wear her down.
It's because we learned that from sitcoms, man.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why people do it. Is because it's such a pervasive thing in sitcoms.
Fuck.
But like,
terrible.
Can we talk about how weird Babs would be in high school? Like, she wouldn't be popular because she has fucking bouffant hair and is wearing poodle skirts to 90s high school.
Yeah, she's good looking.
Yeah, like she's cute, but it's also
she wouldn't be unpopular.
Yeah, well, yeah, but she's not dressing like,
No. Well, and I think that's really interesting is that we very seldom go outside the house,
right?
And we don't see them interact with the world.
Yeah,
very
I would
often.
have liked to see a scene at the high school.
I wonder if they ever go
but
there.
Maybe they
Love
do.
that.
Maybe
would
do.
love to see the scene.
Do we know that season 2 doesn't do that?
We don't know. Like, I guess we should like look into it.
From what I was kind of looking at, it looks like more plots seem to involve Babs, so probably. The one I was looking at was like basically like it was the sex one, and it was like she has a boyfriend at school and she's being pressured to go all the way. but she does not know what that means.
Oh.
And that's where it looks like Skunk comes in. 7-year-old Skunk.
Which, I mean, like, is still a problem in 2020 in some places, in some contexts.
Another thing they did so consistently, so in the apparatus of this show, Mike is the only one who knows that this family is actually a group of 50s sitcom characters. And this part of the premise is that no one else is ever supposed to find out, and he helps them keep this secret. And there's a scene where he's feeling really bad about having stolen the turnerizer, and he just had this bad dream, which, by the way, little aside, the dream, they did the right lighting to make it clear that this was a dream sequence within the fantasy. Like the narrative clarity worked perfect for that. Yeah. Anyway, that's a small aside. But then when he's confessing to his mom that the Nielsen's are actually 50s sitcom characters from the show Hi, Honey, I'm Home, like he spills the beans, and her reaction is what it should be, which is that she clearly doesn't believe him because that makes no sense and is totally implausible.
Yeah.
Like her teenage son is telling her that the family that moved in next door are actually fake people that are from a sitcom. No, obviously she doesn't believe him. That makes no sense at all. And they're able to keep up the secret because why would anyone believe that?
Yeah.
And the only reason Mike believed it is he happened to have caught accidentally that moment where the turnerizer was in action and he saw the world shift from color to black and white.
He's obsessed with the show, so he knew exactly who they were.
And he's obsessed with the show. None of the critics seemed to understand this show. And one of the criticisms was specifically about that point. Why wouldn't Elaine recognize the neighbors from the show? Because if her son always has this show on,
why wouldn't she recognize?
Not only was she not paying attention, but even if she was a rational person, and Elaine is very much positioned as a level-headed, rational, intelligent person, even if she vaguely recognized them as looking similar or having similar names, there's no way that she would jump to the conclusion that this surrealist fantasy is a reality.
Yeah. It's true.
See, I was a little disappointed. I was a little disappointed that she doesn't learn in that episode, because I thought that would have opened up some more storytelling possibilities. For Elaine to be in on it would be interesting with her relationship with Honey, mostly because she can kind of stop riding Honey on things and be like, Honey, you don't understand this. Let me teach you about the modern world. That was actually, I was starting to hope that I wanted their friendship to get a little softer, in that it always felt like Elaine was just really riding Honey really hard.
Maybe it would have gotten there.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I like the way that scene plays out, in that obviously the way he tells her wouldn't make sense. But what if in that same episode she saw the turnerizer and all that, and then she kind of figured it out?
I could see a world where eventually that whole family is in on it, where Elaine, Mike, and Skunk all know that this family are from the 50s, and it becomes a family to family secret instead of a thing that's just carried by Mike. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's something that evolves. And
Mike's not an interesting enough character to carry that secret. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Where are you from? Springfield, Illinois, or Ohio? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was waiting for that moment. That was a good moment.
Like, is that a thing though in TV? They never say which Springfield it is.
Yeah,
well, that's in the Simpsons they don't.
In the Simpsons, because it's there's a Springfield everywhere. So Springfield is like always meant to be every town USA, right? So it's funny because like this is only 91.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know if Simpsons had made the joke about not naming the state yet. My favorite joke, I was like trying to put my finger on. I was like, where would this be at home? And I was like, right, in The Simpsons, when he looks at the Post-it note and it says out of Post-its, went to the store to grab more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if the show, in addition to doing tons of specific references to old classic 50s shows, if they were also building in far more subtle intertextual references to 90s sitcoms that were current at the time.
Maybe. I did find a lot of the things that were presented in the 90s family super relatable. The main thing being, although it's weird that Mike is that obsessed with 50s television.
Yeah.
I can relate to watching too much television, obviously, and using television as a sort of therapy and escape. I can totally relate 1,000%, and that my parents not really seeing it as a huge problem.
Yeah.
Not enough to stop it, at least.
I know that if I had kids, I'm sure I would probably try to keep them
Curb
away.
that a little, yeah.
But on the other hand, I got no regrets.
Yeah. I mean, we now have a podcast about TV, so
yeah, I turned out just
we turned out fine.
I can also relate to all the weird instant food.
Yeah, that was good.
You know, like pot roast in the pouch. Yeah, it was so
because
good.
that could have easily been a product.
Like,
easily.
Yeah, especially in the 90s. The 90s was all about those like janky, like instant things full of chemicals.
And that was only slightly more ridiculous than the products that were real.
Because it was all about, convenience, because there's a lot of working, households with two working parents or single parents or whatever. So it's all about fast. So it's all
instant
Kraft
mash.
dinner or like instant mashed potatoes, instant everything, frozen everything. And now at least you can buy decent frozen food, but it's like in the 90s, I don't want to know what kind of crap I was eating. Like,
that scene where Honey is examining these ready-made instant foods and doesn't know what to make of them, but she puts them in like the thing that's supposed to be microwaved, she puts in the oven, the other thing she puts in the pressure cooker, and it just destroys the kitchen. And they took that gag so far.
Yeah, I thought that was really clever.
That was great. Yeah, it was great.
Speaking of a taste of that era, I think we all could appreciate the way that the closing credits of the show had a like early 90s dance hip hop sort of remix of the opening theme song.
It was good
with the drum machine sound and everything like that.
Yeah, it might as well have just been the guy who did the opening to Ghost Rider.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's the same guy. We should find out. Oh, another fun thing that was very 90s, and I'm sorry I can't come up with any other examples of this off the top of my head, but the whole subplot of women taking self-defense classes.
Oh yeah.
That was like a trope, right? That was a trope.
That's a trope.
In the 90s. And
Friends did it.
Yeah, everybody there's been a scene in
the elbow to the groin.
Yeah, in every
Simpsons
single
did it.
Simpsons, like every single sitcom from that era did a self-defense episode. And I love
specifically women's self-defense.
Yeah, and I love that the characters Honey and Elaine got to apply it and save the day and stop those robbers, and it was like really awesome, a really awesome
the
scene.
over-the-top robbers.
Yeah. It was really.
I'm just glad that Honey had such a sweet 50s persona that she wasn't fucking permanently traumatized from that day that she had.
I know.
That was just like in Golden Palace with Rose, who is so naive about the robbery
that she didn't even realize
that she didn't even react. We started to talk about this sort of tough on crime theme that was so pervasive at the time and the way that the show tackles it. And there's a particular line I wrote down where I think it was
the show is decidedly anti-crime.
Elaine says this line. I think this was in her justification for needing so many locks on the door and for going to do the self-defense classes. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of desperate people out there. You can't trust anyone. And I just found there's so much packed into that line because on the one hand, so Elaine is this open-minded, progressive, liberal character. And so she's trying to understand why people are in the situation they're in. So her reaction to the homeless man, her reaction to crime is one of trying to understand it. So that part, there are a lot of desperate people out there. But on the other hand, you've got the classic, you can't trust anyone, fear of crime aspect of it that was so pervasive at the time and projected in all of these sitcoms.
Yeah.
It's funny, Elaine has a few instances of that where she kind of projects a like a duality in the way she approaches these things, which I think is pretty relatable, even if maybe they weren't even intending it to be. But like, she's afraid of the homeless man who is constantly pestering outside their window, which thank God was not a reoccurring character.
Yeah.
Because I was not prepared to do that every week. But but she also feels bad for him and gives him money, and like she's afraid of him, but also like understands his situation. And then like poor Honey gets flashed
by a separate guy.
Yeah.
By a separate guy.
Yeah, there's a crazy amount of crimes happening.
Yeah, and
there's multiple break-ins.
And Elaine does try to sympathize by saying, well, he's sick. Like he's got an illness. Mind you, I wasn't 100% happy with the handling of all of that, but
yeah,
no, I wasn't either.
There's some problematic things.
But it shows that Elaine as a character is always thinking about other people. She thinks about other people's situations before trying to like pigeonhole them.
Yeah,
basically.
she's trying to understand the more deeply pervasive social problems going on in society. Yeah, in that particular case, I noted that too, where, you know, maybe in 1991, this was, I think the idea of that trench coat flasher being a joke was
big
something,
thing.
was a big thing
in the 90s.
In the 90s in TV shows.
Even a trope.
That might be a trope. And now we just be like, there's nothing funny about that.
That's sexual assault.
This guy's
that's
committing serial sexual assault.
And you know who he is, and you know where he lives, and nobody's called the cops.
But as far as what it says about the Elaine character and her mindset of trying to understand society's problems and get to root causes of things and not just think the worst of people automatically, it says something good about her character. Although today, if you made that show, you would absolutely not do that scene. But
I don't have faith that Big Bang Theory wouldn't do a flasher scene like that. I don't have faith that it's gotten better.
So I did read some reviews of this show, and all of them seem to assume that the premise of this 50s sitcom family transplanted into the 90s is purely a superficial gimmick, and that there is no depth to it whatsoever, and there aren't any sort of thematic relevant points being made. They all just talk about it as if it's just a silly gimmick that's going to wear out after a few episodes. And I'm thinking, like, even after just episode 1, I could tell that this was clearly going beyond a gimmick and into something a lot deeper. And, you know, we'll never know exactly how far they would have been able to carry this. Like, one thing that I read made a good point that this show, because it's a satire, and because it's not entirely rendered as a character-driven sitcom, right off the bat, we've talked a lot about how Honey is an evolving and growing character that is gaining a lot of depth. But overall, across the board, it's a very high concept, plot driven in a sense by this satire show. So could this show have lasted for 10 seasons? Maybe not. But
I think they could have done 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
And then they probably would have been all right.
Yeah. Could this show have lasted a while and continued to explore this in increasing complexity? I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see a show with this concept show up soon again.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. It'd probably be on cable, but maybe it was just playing to the wrong crowd, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I just can't. I can't with some of these reviews where it's just being like, how do you not like the fucking show's really on the nose, which may be an issue too, but like the fact that people weren't even seeing, they're like, oh, you know, the fact that they were saying it was like a superficial gimmick, and you're like, it's really not.
Yeah,
like, it's
I
too
didn't
smart.
think it was
It's too smart for television. Yeah.
And
it's like, were we watching the same show as these critics? Like,
exactly. And this is what I would refer to with intelligent satire as the Colbert problem, which is that I think some people who were watching this were not watching the same show we were, because they did not necessarily see the satire as satire. They saw some of it as being done in earnest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not everything is going to be for everybody, and not everything, you know, in some cases, some things apply to big audiences and some things apply to small audiences. And I think that no matter when the show was on, it was always going to apply to a smaller audience.
Yeah. And I think it might have been too progressive overall.
Yeah.
Like
it's
too
very progressive
for the taste of these network execs, especially at ABC.
The fact that a couple of the reviews that I read seemed to be suggesting that the show did not really have much real commentary, going beyond very superficial digs at a comparison between the 50s and the 90s. The way that it was written, I'm not going to like read a whole article here, but it came across like they weren't really noticing.
They weren't picking up on the
commentary that was
all.
there,
Yeah.
which makes me wonder if some of the things that seem really clear to us were, it was almost like the conversation between Honey and Lloyd in that scene where Lloyd is just not understanding her perspective. So he's basically just irritated by the fact that she's even talking.
It's like, what is even being said right now?
What is even happening right now?
Yeah.
Whereas she's like, we're trying to have an important conversation. And he's like, a conversation about what? I think that's what was
funny.
happening.
That's a good point, Aaron.
I think the audience had a lot of Lloyds. So at this particular juncture, I think we should talk about 6 Degrees of Friends, and we're going to have at least a temporary moratorium on using Mad About You and or Lisa Kudrow for this purpose.
You can use Mad About You, just don't use Ursula Buffet.
Okay.
That's fair. That's fair. You can use...
Yeah, but that's the connector. Okay, so there is a Lisa Kudrow connection, but I won't talk about it here.
Thank you.
But in general, Hi, Honey, I'm Home is separated from the iconic sitcom Friends by 2 degrees.
All right.
Julie Benz, who of course plays Bab Nielsen, had a reoccurring role on another short-lived sitcom, which we should probably eventually cover, called Ask Harriet. And one of her co-stars was Willie Garson. Willie Garson guest starred on Friends.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Great. And what do we have for the spin-off?
A lot of great people.
A lot of great people. So we'll start with our main couple, Stephen C. Bradbury, who played Lloyd Nielsen. He's just done a million TV shows. He's best known as playing a judge on Law and Order SVU, his like longest running role on television. He's just has a ton of credits. He's everywhere. Our favorite, Charlotte Booker, who plays Honey Nielsen, has also done like tons and tons of TV. Julie Benz, who we've already talked about as being a favorite of ours, played Babs Nielsen. She's a very prolific actor in many movies and television series, and a lot of them are ones with cult fan bases. She was in one of my favorite teen movies, Jawbreaker.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, and she is in a couple of Barry's top series, Buffy and Angel.
Yes, she plays Darla on Buffy and Angel.
Yeah.
And she's phenomenal on that.
Yeah. And a lot of people know her for her role as Rita on Dexter.
Yes.
The sort of long-suffering wife of Dexter. And she's now currently in one of mine and Aaron's favorite new shows, On Becoming a God in Central Florida.
Oh, is she? That's awesome.
And then, of course, we have Michael Patrick King, who was one of the writers of Hi, Honey, I'm Home. And he, of course, went on to create a lot of very popular hit series, including write for and create. He wrote for Murphy Brown. He is a co-creator of Sex and the City and Two Broke Girls. He also co-created one of my favorites of all time that I just recently rewatched, The Comeback. So that's the...
Oh, wow.
I didn't know he was involved in that.
Yeah, so he co-created it with Lisa Kudrow.
Oh, God, you brought up Lisa Kudrow.
So there's Lisa Kudrow. I didn't do it in the 6 Degrees of Friends,
I know,
though.
but you still found a way to bring up Lisa Kudrow.
I still found a way to. Yeah, we weren't supposed to talk about her.
I love The Comeback.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry.
Did you? Yeah.
AJ
I was like,
McClain.
Thank you. Oh, my God. Thank you.
Famously a member of the Backstreet Boys.
So the first skunk.
AJ McClain was the original skunk. So they had filmed a pilot before it was bought by the network. And AJ McClain, who famously went on to be in the Backstreet Boys, played the role of skunk. And then he was like later recast when the series was actually
And they recast Elaine, too.
They recast Elaine as well.
Oh, it wasn't Susan Kella in the original?
No, and we were able to watch both versions of episode 1.
It was kind of freaky because it was the exact same episode. It was just, I think there was a little bit of a difference in the dialogue, the opening dialogue with her and Mike, but
interesting.
Very
other
similar.
than that, it was like the same.
I did a bit of a dive into who the creators are and what other things they've done since and what their deal is right now. And it was a bit of an interesting discovery. Rick Mitz, who's one of the co-creators, teaches screenwriting at Columbia College Hollywood and is the author of a number of books on sitcoms and television history. And Penny Stallings has authored several books about sitcoms, most notably for our purposes, one called The Ultimate Friends Companion.
They're sitcom scholars.
They are sitcom scholars.
No, I found a fun connection that just popped out of nowhere. But one of the producers, certainly one of the richest people to come out of this, she was working for Nickelodeon at the time, but it was Suzanne Collins, the best-selling author of the Hunger Games books.
Oh, yes, I did notice that too.
I want to share my biggest laugh from the show before we wrap things up. It's this moment in what turned out to be the last episode to air. Mike gives this corsage to Babs and says goodbye for what he thinks is going to be the last time because the 50s family is going to be recalled back onto television reruns and out of the 90s world. And he's saying goodbye to her, and he gives her this corsage that was supposed to be for this school dance, I guess, that they were going to be going to together. And he says, "Good luck at your homecoming. I'll be watching. Saturdays, 8:30. And she says, "Oh, Mike," with this kind of sweet expression. And then after a beat, 7:30 Central.
Yeah. That got a...
and that's exactly how I laughed, too.
That got a huge laugh for me. Because Julie Benz's delivery of it was perfect.
Yeah.
It was just so sweetly delivered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of one-off lines that just killed me.
Yeah. And that line in one moment encapsulated what works about this show because it was a sweet character to character moment in this conversation between these two people. But at the same time, it did not break the facade.
Nope.
I mean, I guess if I think about it, who is the audience for this show when...
It's us.
It's us.
We're the audience.
We're the audience for this show.
And we were too young.
So, Barry, I'm a network executive and you're a producer. Pitch me, "Hi, honey, I'm home."
All right. I think I can do it. Or rather, Mr. Producer can do it. Hey, Aaron.
Mr. Producer.
Have I got a show for you?
All right.
It's a sitcom set today in 1991 about a typical sitcom family of today, 1991. They're shocked to discover that their new next-door neighbors are the characters of a beloved 1950s sitcom called Hi, Honey, I'm Home. Together, they'll hold a mirror up to modern society by showing that concepts such as sexism, racism, outdated gender roles have been accepted so long in the media that if one were to watch this show in 30 years, say, 2020, both sides of the sitcom coin would seem equally as outdated and prescient about society's problems.
Wow.
What?
No, nothing, Mr. Producer. That's just a well thought out concept. I'm surprised you came up with it.
Aaron, I've got 2 master's degrees. How do you think I got this job?
No,
It's not just coke parties and schmoozing over here.
I'm sorry.
You think I want to be pitching you this shit week after week? I've got dreams, man. I've got a soul. Sometimes it breaks my heart selling the shit sandwiches I've made to pay the bills. But someone's got to do it, Aaron. Someone's got to do it. Who's going to do it? Are you going to do it?
Okay, I get it. But who's really going to watch a show like this?
Probably no one.
Hi, honey, I'm home.
This was fun. We've had a lot of laughs, but some things are no laughing matter. What did we learn from watching Hi, Honey, I'm Home?
We learned that it is actually possible for all 3 of us to genuinely like one of these failed and or forgotten sitcoms that we review for this podcast.
And scene.
That Was a Show is a production of Radio Gizmo. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on Instagram for info about upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends about it.
Next time on That Was a Show, kind of does make me want to go to Hawaii, even though they don't show much of Hawaii.
It makes me want to do this with my life. I don't know. None of it works, and the scene goes on forever.
This scene was so boring that I don't think I was even paying attention.
Actually, I really enjoy the reoccurring joke of how bad he was at being a stockbroker.
He's like, I didn't know anything about being a stockbroker. You're my stockbroker.
Yeah.
Morse is jacked.
Yeah, for sure.
He is.
He's about to play a corrupt cop somewhere. Ugh, that ponytail is really offensive.
I enjoy it.
Radio Gizmo.